All right, thank you again for joining us this evening. My name is Leticia Preciado, and I'm the Parent Engagement Coordinator here at Pittsburgh Unified School District. Thank you for joining us this evening for our parent webinar on depression. Joining me this evening is Ms. Jacqueline from La Clínica, who will be doing this evening's presentation. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to place your questions in the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring questions throughout the presentation. Thank you so much for joining. If you just joined us, if you could please sign in using the link that's in the chat, we would appreciate it. And I'm going to give a warm welcome. Join me in giving Jacqueline a warm welcome.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope you were here for our stress and anxiety presentations. And today we're going to be going over depression. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you see it okay, Leticia?
Yes, we can see it fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So just to get started, for those of you that were here last week, I wanted to check in and see if you did the homework. From our first session on stress, our homework was to focus on getting good quality sleep by creating a sleep routine for ourselves. Our homework last week was to try one of the different mind-body therapies. So you can associate your breathing with those intentional body movements, again, with mostly the goal of lowering your heart rate and your breathing. So I hope you had time to do the mind-body therapies, and 20 points to everyone that did, and I'm keeping track of points. So a little bit of a recap. We can go over really quickly the difference between stress and anxiety. So if we remember, stress and anxiety are necessary for our survival, and it's a response to a difference in our environment, so a challenge or a demand, whereas anxiety might not have a clear trigger. Stress happens temporarily. It is a response, and it tends to ease once the issue is resolved. But anxiety can be persistent even after whatever the threat was has already subsided. If you remember the analogy with the fire alarm, so when something stressful happens and our fire alarm goes off and we put out the fire and the alarm subsides. But with anxiety and anxiety disorders, the alarm goes off for either no reason or it continuously goes off even after the situation has been handled. So those are some of the key differences between stress and anxiety. And they can become very dangerous when they do not go away and get worse over time. And chronic stress and anxiety disorders greatly increase the risk of developing those inflammatory diseases. Remember, one of our major stress hormones is called cortisol, it's a steroid, and it causes inflammation. And that's how we get that inflammatory bowel disease if we carry a lot of stress and have constant inflammation. Heart disease, norepinephrine released when we're stressed, it makes our blood pressure rise, and having that tension on our blood vessels causes damage and they get narrower, which can lead to heart attack or stroke. And diabetes mellitus type 2, when we're getting our energy signals saying you need to fight or flight, we have all of that glucose going through our body prepared to give us energy, when in reality we don't need it because we're not running away from a saber-toothed tiger. And then that reduces our insulin sensitivity and can lead to weight gain and diabetes. There are lots of different treatment options for stress and anxiety. We talked about CBT, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. So that talk therapy that engages getting to the root of understanding your behaviors surrounding your different moods and actions. And then there are also the medications. So SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. And there's also different ways to manage it. So getting that quality sleep, asking for help in any way that makes sense to you. Doesn't have to be formal help. It can be asking for direction, well, not directions anymore, I guess, asking a question about the time, just if you needed to talk to a human today because you feel out of control or like you need socialization. Exercising, getting your blood pumping. Remember, your heart is a muscle, so you do want to work out that muscle as well to keep your body healthy. And again, using those mind-body techniques where we really get into touch with how we're breathing and how we're carrying our stress and being mindful with where our body is and where our mind is going and how we can control that. And then I made my DVC students guess and name these chemicals, but I can't do that here. But so these are our key chemicals again. That's dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, and norepinephrine. So again, we are going to be talking about depression today. It can be a fairly tough subject for some people. So I just want everyone to know that this is a brave space. We might get uncomfortable. If for any reason you need to leave the presentation, I totally understand. But I hope we can get through this together with confidence and as a small little Zoom family. So depression is one of the most common mental illnesses in the United States. It impacts 5% of all adults, and it involves persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and losing interest in things you used to enjoy. So we've heard plenty about, I'm depressed or I'm feeling depressed. And often we kind of get like, oh, like snap out of it, or, just experiencing the blues. Or when people are depressed, it can be a sign of weakness. And this is not the case. Depressive disorder is really debilitating for a lot of individuals. And as we know, mental health is so closely linked to our physical health. But again, best news, it's one of the most treatable disorders. So this is a chart just showing the difference in mental health diagnosis and how different people have been struggling. This is people that have been diagnosed with depression in their lifetime. And this column is 2017. And this column is 2023. And this is showing the change in percentage over those 6 years. So we can see women, for example, there are 10% more women diagnosed with depression in the past 6 years. It most heavily influenced those ages 18 to 29, saw the highest percentage increase. And Black and Hispanic adults had greater increase in depression than their white counterparts. So it impacts a lot of individuals. Imagine 36, that's a lot of people. So again, 5% of the population, a lot of people are diagnosed with depression. The major types of depression are clinical depression or major depressive disorder and persistent depressive disorder. The difference between these two is clinical depression tends to be in episodes, so a couple months at a time, or experiencing, again, those depressive episodes, whereas persistent depressive disorder tends to last much longer, usually over years. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, that's a type of depression that can impact those who have menses or periods. It's usually the week before the period when you experience that surge in hormones that can cause depression as well. And then other depressive disorders due to other conditions. And we'll talk a little bit more about chronic disease and medications that can contribute to that as well. So symptoms of depression, again, we can feel anxious, we can feel stressed, and we can feel depressed. But the difference is when we're experiencing actual depressive disorder is when these symptoms are severe enough that they interfere with our day-to-day activities. So some symptoms include, the sadness, emptiness, and hopelessness. Having unexplained physical problems, I think we've come to see, our mental health manifests physically. Hives, for example, that's a sign of stress or depression. Irritability, agitation, and angry outbursts. So again, you know, we all show symptoms very differently. A lot of the time, men tend to have more of the agitation as a symptom of depression and are often underdiagnosed for those reasons. Having frequent or reoccurring thoughts of death, suicidal thoughts or attempts, and changes in eating habits, whether that be increasing your intake or decreasing significantly. And again, these are severe changes that are noticeable in your day-to-day. Some other symptoms include trouble thinking, concentrating, and remembering, having slowed speaking, body movements, and thinking. So really having that brain fog, you know, your cognitive abilities aren't doing as great. Having feelings of worthlessness, guilt, and self-blame, trouble sleeping and insomnia. Remember, serotonin impacts your sleep-wake cycle, helps you feel tired. So if we're having way off serotonin levels, we might not be getting into our natural rhythm for sleep. And then loss of interest or pleasure in previous activities. So things that you used to truly enjoy, if you're just not having them at all anymore, that can also be a symptom of depression. So what are the causes of depressive disorder? It starts mostly with brain chemistry. So the imbalance of the neurotransmitters and those hormones that we mentioned earlier. Serotonin and dopamine are two of the most common neurotransmitters associated with depression. Remember, for stress, we talk a little bit more about like norepinephrine, for example, or cortisol, the steroid, the stress steroid. Also, menses, pregnancy, and menopause can cause depressive disorder. Again, there is a huge hormone imbalance during those times when women experience these different women things, and that causes that imbalance as well. Different medical conditions and medication can cause depressive disorders. So individuals that may need to be on some sort of sedative or some blood pressure medications can attribute to depression. Stressful life events and difficult experiences can have those depressive disorders. And there is a lot of ongoing research right now looking into inherited genes and inherited traits from your family members. So different risk factors for depression. Certain personality traits. So individuals that have low self-esteem or are really dependent. Again, same with when we talk about anxiety disorders, having those certain personality traits. Being in an unsafe environment, whether that's at home, in your work, different places that just make you feel on edge all the time. Having a history of another mental health disorder is also a risk factor. So an anxiety disorder, experiencing PTSD, as well as addictions can contribute to developing depression. And traumatic and stressful events like death or a major financial issue or injury. More risk factors, again, certain medications, blood pressure and sleeping pills, you know, any medications that impact our neurotransmitters or our hormones, they can impact us in a negative way as well. And that's why I always say you have to be the biggest advocate for your own health. You know your body better than anyone else, so it's your responsibility to take care of it. Having variations in gender identity is being pointed out as a major risk factor for developing depressive disorders, especially for younger people. And if we bounce back really quickly to our chart, again, we can see that in that 18 to 29 year age group, 14% more individuals were diagnosed in the past 6 years. So the young people that are experiencing these changes can also be at higher risk. Having serious or chronic illness, so having cancer or a stroke or something debilitating, those can cause depression. And having blood relatives with history of other mental health disorders, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or substance abuse. Okay, we're gonna watch a quick video.
You guys, oh, God, it's exhausting. That's that, that's a week. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So. Oh wow, how you doing? You good? Oh, sorry, thank you. How you doing? God, it's exciting, isn't it?
Sorry, Leticia. I think I ended up sharing your screen for a second. So let me bounce back to mine. Sorry about that. Gosh, in the middle of my really dramatic video too. Okay, so just to recap, understanding that people experiencing their symptoms really differently, and it's important to check in on the people around you. Again, when we talk about symptoms, some people experience with agitation or have those really emotionally distressing days, but other people don't show it at all. So it is important to advocate for yourself, advocate for your family, and make sure to check in on the people around you. And then get rid of this. Okay, and then this one, just to make us all feel better. When in doubt, videos of baby goats in pajamas always makes me happier. And that video gets me every time. So I just wanted to share with you my favorite video of baby goats in pajamas. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so that being said, without treatment, depression actually can become worse and increase your chances of developing other health conditions like dementia. Again, we talked about how stress and anxiety impact our brains, depression as well. It's really hard, it's bad on your brain. It can lead to worsening of other existing health conditions like diabetes or chronic pain. And in some situations, it can lead to self-harm or death. This on the right is showing the top 5 leading causes of death for age groups under 1 to 45 to 54 for all races and both sexes from 2011 to 2021. So we can see in the first row, it's primarily unintentional injury, which is also known as accidental death. So that's, falls, drowning, car accident, anything accidental or unintentional. And then if you look at our second row, suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds, 15 to 24-year-olds, and 25 to 34-year-olds. It's the fourth leading cause of death for 35 to 44, and the fifth for 45 to 54, which is incredibly alarming when we see that suicide is the second leading cause of death for all people 10 to 34 years old. The second leading cause of death for half of our population. So just keeping that in mind, that without treatment, depression really can get much worse. And this is one thing that we're in control of, Like I said, this is one of the most treatable disorders, so it's really important to talk about it and be able to have conversations about depression to show people you're not alone. It's not just you. This is incredibly common, and that's why we're here to try and break down these barriers around these conversations. So a few facts about suicide. 9 out of 10 people who attempt suicide and survive will not later die of suicide. So only 23% reattempt to commit suicide, and 70% had no further attempt. So it is, instant decisions. And we'll see for individuals that did not, that attempted suicide and survived, they're often asked this question for part of a study, and it says, how much time passed between the time you decided to complete suicide and when you actually attempted suicide? 1 in 4 people said less than 5 minutes. Only 50% of people said it was less than 20 minutes, and only 13% deliberated for more than a day. So 1 in 4 people did it within 5 minutes of deciding they wanted to do it. And it really is just a spur of the moment decision, because again, we see 90% who attempt and survive, most of them have no other attempt. So it can just be something that comes up in a crisis, especially for younger people. So 1/3 of youth who died by suicide had faced a crisis within 24 hours. So we can use crises as a predictive factor for suicide risk, especially in younger individuals. And suicide rates directly correlate with firearm prevalence. There's increased risk of suicide for all genders, races, and ages, even when we're controlling for mental illness and substance use. So in statistics, when we're looking at different groups and we're evening them out in all ways besides for the factors we're looking at, and that's when we say controlling for. So, getting rid of all of the issues of mental illness and substance abuse and depression, regardless, all genders, races, and ages have an increased risk directly correlating with firearm prevalence. So states that have higher guns also have higher death by firearm. And we can imagine that makes sense because, when we talk about suicide attempts that are non-fatal, often that can be self-harm or carbon monoxide poisoning, drowning, suffocation, overdosing. These are all things that take a little bit of time. There's time to be found. There's time to change your mind. However, with firearms, in less than 5 minutes, you could easily find a firearm and take your own life. So there's a direct correlation between those two things. And states with higher firearm prevalence have higher suicide rates in general as well. But for suicide and crisis prevention, we are super fortunate in Contra Costa to have the Contra Costa Crisis Center, or just 211. They are always available for suicide prevention and for resources. And you're able to text or call to get any support you need. Again, ask and you shall receive. There are resources all around us. All we have to do is ask for them. So even though, depression impacts a lot of people and can be really dangerous, it's also one of the most treatable mental health conditions. And 80 to 90% of people with depression who seek treatment eventually respond well to it. So it might not be immediate, but those who seek it and get it will eventually respond well. And the different treatment options include psychotherapy, which is that talk therapy or that cognitive behavioral therapy where we talk about our actions mixed with our emotions and rationalize these things. Medications, there are lots of different antidepressants. They all act on different neurotransmitters or chemicals, and it can take a lot of time to figure out what works best for you, what works best for any individual. So working closely with a provider, advocating for yourself, paying attention to your body, those are things that you can do in those instances as well. And brain stimulation therapy. Also, we used to refer to it as like electroshock therapy, which isn't incredibly accurate, but it's really helpful for people with severe depression and psychosis. So there's electroconvulsive therapy, which uses, again, those electric currents. There's magnetic stimulation, and then there's vagus nerve stimulation. And I'll show you. These are different treatment options for depression and our other mental health disorders. The one on the right, we had already looked at with anxiety, and it's just showing the difference in impactfulness between cognitive behavioral therapy versus medication versus traditional talk therapy. And we can see in particular for phobias, cognitive behavioral therapy really works. Whereas for social anxiety, medication seems to be more impactful. On this one, we can see patients gauge how much these different interventions helped, wellness strategies, medical technologies, support groups, talk therapy, and medication. And the extremely helpful tends to be lowest in medical technologies and support groups. And the helps some, which is kind of, what we're aiming for most of the time, happens with medication, therapy, and mostly wellness strategies. This is also showing from a scale of highest to lowest, the scores that people experienced for depression, sadness, anxiety, and anger, and that's per therapy session. So we can see, for example, this line is for depression. Those that had a score starting in the 30s, the more consistently and longer time they went to therapy, the lower their score got in a good way. So their depression was improving. And I think the anger one's kind of interesting because it's very, very hit and miss. But again, those who seek out those treatments, they will eventually be successful. This one in particular goes into the electroshock therapy a little bit more closely, because again, when we're talking about our brain chemistry, when we're talking about neurotransmitters, like the electricity in our brain is what controls those neural impulses. So you imagine if the electricity is incredibly off in our brain, having that convulsive therapy to reboot the system can help impact depression and especially psychosis. And this is showing the sessions of electroconvulsive therapy. And this is showing the levels of, it's a certain chemical in the brain associated with cognitive ability called a neurotrophin. And it shows that every time we have an electroshock therapy session, we slowly see an increase in those neurotrophins raising as well. And that's showing how we can start improving the brain by using those shock therapies as well. So we talked about managing stress and anxiety. When we talk about managing depression, the most important way to manage it is to seek treatment at the earliest sign of a problem, because depression can get worse very quickly. And as we've seen, can lead to rash decision-making. So as soon as you notice any sort of problems, it's important to ask for seek care immediately. Reaching out to friends and family, especially in times of crisis. Again, when we experience crisis, those are the times that we need support most. Also, taking steps to control stress and increase that resilience and boost your self-esteem. We are in control of our breathing. We're in control of what we put into our body. So we're able to make those steps to help boost our self-esteem. And taking care of your body, eating right, sleeping regularly, and staying on a schedule, and exercising, all of those things to help our blood flow, to help our body repair and to refresh ourselves. And again, if you need help, help is there. So contacting a provider, the suicide hotline or 211, someone in your faith community, but ask and you shall receive. There is help available. All we have to do is seek it out. In the world of public health, we have been talking a lot more about the role of social support in health. When we did talk about the weathering hypothesis, remember when we are all on our own boats and we're all at sea, and some people have rougher seas than others, and their boat gets tore up much more quickly than someone in much calmer waters. having social support can help mitigate some of those stressors. So when people are socially connected and have stable and supportive relationships, they're more likely to make healthy choices and have better and physical mental health outcomes and are better able to cope. So we can see social connection is the experience of feeling close to others. Having high social connection creates 50% increased chance of longevity. There's lower rates of anxiety and depression, and it can help you better regulate your emotions, and it increases self-esteem and empathy. And this is my favorite. Having low social connection is worse for your health than smoking, high blood pressure, or obesity. It also can cause higher inflammation at the cellular level, susceptibility to anxiety and depression, slower recovery from disease as well. And that antisocial behavior can lead to violence and, again, suicide with that low social support. So there are a lot of different ways to cope with depression. We just have to go day to day and still work with these things. And part of that is challenging those negative thoughts. So, having those reoccurring thoughts of hopelessness or self-blame, challenging those thoughts, saying them out loud, challenging yourself to rationalize, what I'm saying is not true. Staying in touch, that's really important as well. Isolation is really bad on the brain. So staying in touch with other people, which can also mean taking on responsibilities. For me, for example, I can disappoint myself, but I cannot disappoint someone else. So taking on extra responsibilities or making commitments, that helps me cope with my mental health as well, if I do seem to be, feeling extra depressed or wanting to isolate. And setting a schedule. We talked about sleep schedules. Our body is a complex machine, and having it on a set schedule, just like a toddler or a puppy, we can get more familiar with what we're doing and having more regular sleep and more regular emotional regulation. Setting goals and doing new things, those both help cope with depression too. I'm not spontaneous. I do not like to try new things. If I'm not good at it, I don't want to do it. I'm working on it still. But doing something new, getting your heart racing, trying to get a smile on your face again because you're having a new experience. It's also really important to avoid alcohol and other drugs. Again, alcohol is a depressant. Many drugs are depressants, and that does not assist with feeling any better. And lastly, try to have fun. Every day is hard. We all have so much going on all the time. And one thing we can do is just try to have fun with it. Life's always going to be difficult, but we try to laugh through it with that social connection and with the people we love and staying in touch. And the most important thing you can do, I'll say it's more important than exercise. It's not quite as important as sleep. Well, maybe it is. But the most important thing you can do is to feed yourself. Our bodies are literally made of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, right? Those carbohydrates are what make our strands, the triglycerides, or the fatty acids that create our cellular membranes. Amino acids are what tell our cells what to do. And then we have our nucleic acids, so RNA and DNA. And then ATP, which is the energy our body uses to do everything. The ATP Krebs cycle. Does anyone remember that? No. But feeding yourself is important because your body, like I said, it's a well-working machine. Even when we're on autopilot, we're using energy. So your basal metabolic rate is the energy being used by just existing. So your liver functioning, kidneys when it's, processing urine, digestion takes a lot of energy, and your brain, there's a lot going on in your brain at night. So imagine 20% of your energy is being used by muscle and by your other organs. So you have to replace that energy that you use. You treat yourself like a toddler, eat regularly, keep your blood sugar, as normal as possible. And you are also always burning calories, doing daily activities like laughing or crying. I did look these numbers up. Laughing can burn about 10 to 40 calories every 15 minutes, depending on if you cry like me or not. Crying is about the same. Walking, a 30-minute walk can burn anywhere from 100 to 200 calories. And sleeping, again, an 8-hour sleep night can burn up as many as 640 calories because a lot's going on while you're sleeping. When we talked about that good sleep, that's when we're resting and restoring. That's when we're fixing our muscle tissue. That's when we're building these connections in our brain from the day. So sleeping and eating are my two favorite things. And that's what I want you to know, and everything else, but mostly that. So food, again, super important for your body. Major diseases like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, and Alzheimer's have all been linked to that chronic inflammation. Again, having that inflammation from that cortisol, and inflammation can be caused by the foods we eat. So foods that cause inflammation, your refined carbs, I say all of the white things. So white bread, pastas, those baked goods, processed and fried foods. So your chips and sweets. Sweetened beverages are the biggest one. And sweetened beverages carry way more empty calories than are needed. If you want to do anything for your health, I would give up soda and Gatorades and juices. Water's the best. Red meats can lead to chronic inflammation as well. So your steak and processed meats, trans fats as well, margarine and non-dairy coffee creamers. Margarine is essentially lard that they wanted to make shelf stable. So they turned it into a solid. Margarine is another thing that I would recommend that you give up as well. So if you have it in your fridge, toss it out. But there are plenty of anti-inflammatory foods as well. So I'm sure we hear about this all the time with like our antioxidants and our anti-inflammatories. So that extra virgin olive oil is the big one. Green vegetables, you know, those darker green cruciferous vegetables, as well as your leafy spinach, nuts and seeds, so almonds, pumpkin seeds, and walnuts, different fruits, so your citruses and berries. Fatty fishes like salmon, tuna, and sardines are really beneficial to the body, and pre and probiotics, so that dietary fiber, bananas and asparagus have a lot of fiber, and fermented foods like yogurt, kimchi, kombucha. And these are all things that are linked to the Mediterranean diet. So also, again, those berries are really good for the brain. They help with improving memory. Coffee and tea, caffeine and antioxidants can help with concentration. Walnuts are a super nut, the antioxidant, and they carry alpha linoleic acid that improves memory. Turmeric has been used in a lot of Ayurvedic medicines, and it has those anti-inflammatory benefits. Those green leafy vegetables, they have that folate that's necessary and lutein, and it helps slow that cognitive decline. And again, those fatty fishes, our bodies are made of carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. So getting those fats into our body to replenish it, super important. And the non-animal protein, great sources of those fats are flax seeds, avocados, and again, walnuts. And this is a nice little graphic showing a healthy brain, which includes getting in those omega-3 and 6 fatty acids, having exercise, doing the traditional Mediterranean diet that's low in meat. You can see that there is increased brain matter, there's lower inflammation and higher insulin sensitivity. Remember, we want our body to be able to use the food in our body, which you need insulin. And then on the other side, we can see an unhealthy brain that is attributed from lots of inflammation from our body, from our foods, and it's typically associated with the Western diet and with a lot of those simple carbohydrates in the sedentary lifestyle. And if you look at this graph, you'll see higher, the red is the higher brain activity down to lower brain activity. Individuals on a Mediterranean diet that are getting those omega-3s and 6s and those proteins have much more brain activity in the prefrontal cortex, as well as the occipital lobes. And then you can see in the Western diet, there is much less brain activity in these areas. And this is also a brain that has Alzheimer's. So having that decreased brain activity is associated with that cognitive decline, with that development of, memory loss. So that's why it is so important to get these different nutrients into our body, like that folate, like that alpha linoleic acid, and you get those from what you eat. So putting the food into your body to replenish all of these nutrients that we use to build cells, to, improve our muscles, to improve our memory, we need to take in these nutrients. Feed yourself like a toddler, sleep like a toddler, feed like a toddler. You are a toddler. Also, spices. Spices have been used for forever, and they have a lot of different health benefits. And all of these things, I have sources. I made sure that they were accurate. So cinnamon can help lower blood sugar. So it slows the breakdown of carbs. So rather than getting all of that carbohydrate, glucose in your blood at one time, it releases a little bit at a time. So it can improve that insulin sensitivity since we're not flooded with blood sugar, right? So in a study, cinnamon decreased the fasting blood sugar by 10 to 30% in diabetic patients. Sage, the original name for sage in Latin is salvere, like salvation, because that's how healthy that they took it as. They named it to save. And it can help improve brain function. And it inhibits the breakdown of acetylcholine. And in a study, sage extract was shown to produce significant improvement in brain function in Alzheimer's patients. Acetylcholine is also what starts to die off when you have that cognitive decline. And there is actually blood tests coming out for Alzheimer's risks, and it measures the plaques from those acetylcholines breaking down. Cloves can reduce arthritis risk, and they support eye health because they contain antioxidant called eugenol. And it has been used as far back as 1649 for toothaches as a natural anesthetic. And I will tell you, I cannot even stand the smell of cloves because when I was little and got my wisdom teeth out, they put like clove extract into your wisdom teeth holes as an anesthetic and to protect you from dry sockets. And ever since then, I can't stand the smell of cloves because it made me sick and I got dry sockets. But it's been used forever. Peppermint can help improve pain management in IBS. So that irritable bowel syndrome that we get from that chronic inflammation. And it also can help reduce nausea because it helps relax the smooth muscles of the colon. And there was a study showing that peppermint aromatherapy showed significant reductions in nausea for women in labor. Cayenne pepper can reduce appetite and increase fat burning because of the active ingredient capsaicin. Capsaicin is a common ingredient in many weight loss supplements. And I did want to touch on the word supplement. Supplements are supplementary. It's for the things that you're not getting into your diet, and you can supplement it with a pill. But the goal is to actually get these micronutrients through your diet. Taking a multivitamin is important because we do not get all the micronutrients we need from our produce as much as we should, definitely. But taking a significant amount of supplements, supplementing your body with the actual food could be a better option. And if you're low on something, figuring out how you can get it in your diet would be a better option. Also, ginger can treat nausea and has strong anti-inflammatory properties. In those with colon cancer, there was decreased markers for colon inflammation and decreased pain and stiffness, and it had the similar effectiveness with aspirin. So these things have been used in, alternate forms of medicine for a long time. And, they say drink ginger ale when you don't feel good or ginger tummy tea. So we do use these things all the time. Fun facts. So ginger was actually cultivated in China and India for millennium, and it's been used for nausea and indigestion and pain relief. Turmeric, it's that yellow or dark yellow color. It's been a staple in Ayurvedic medicine for centuries. It's been used for wound healing, inflammation, and skin conditions. Cinnamon, not only does it help with insulin, but it was used in ancient China to treat coughs, diarrhea, and menstrual cramps. Clove has always been valued for its antiseptic properties for toothaches, those mouth sores, and also digestive issues. Honey might be the coolest thing on earth. It's a natural sweetener with antimicrobial properties. It's been used for wound healing, coughs, and sore throats in various cultures. In ours even, tea and honey, that's what you're always told to do when you're sick or have a sore throat. And chamomile has been used by the Egyptians and Romans to promote relaxation and sleep and to ease anxiety and GI upset. So chamomile tea or chamomile lotion, when we're looking at those sleepy lotions for kids, they usually are lavender or chamomile to promote relaxation. There are also alternative forms of managing depression. Ketamine therapy, there's a lot of research going into that. It's being practiced by doctors. There was a study in Germany that showed bouldering in improved depression in male inmates, but I also think it's just really cool to rock climb. That could just be part of it. Psilocybin, people microdose with psilocybin. Sensory deprivation tanks have been used to start helping with anxiety and depression. It's really common now. There's a lot of, they call it float therapy, but it's essentially just they add salt into the water to make it easier for you to float on top of it. And there's no light, no sound. And it's meant to send you into a euphoric state. I don't think it would be for me, but that's what a lot of people use. And light therapy, getting exposed to natural light during the daytime is so important. And when you're lacking that, supplementing it with light therapy is really impactful. I went to school in Seattle, and that school had a lot of international students that were not used to Pacific Northwest weather. And my college actually had a huge light therapy room because a lot of people were suffering. And for me, for example, as well, when I get home from work, I usually go outside and have my outside quiet time and just try to get the rest of the daylight in for the day, because that's something that really helps me. And other ways to manage anxiety, again, goats and coats and baby animals are one of the best ways to manage depression, not scientifically proven, but this was a heavy lecture, so I want to make sure we end it on adorable animals. So again, if we talked about stress, anxiety, and depression, and there are so many different options of managing these things, and most of it comes down to just taking care of your basics, taking care of your body through sleep, through eating, and treating yourself like a small child, having a bedtime routine, having a bedtime story, making sure you brush your teeth. So favorite stress management methods, I will list a couple that I've gotten so far from my students at DVC as well that have done this class. One of their favorites was the mammalian diving reflex. I actually had a few students go home and do it, and they were like, yeah, my stress was so bad, and I shoved my face in a bowl of ice water, and it actually helped. And I'm like, that's fantastic. You might not always have the opportunity to put your face in ice water. So other ways, a lot of people really enjoy the belly breathing. And honestly, I think that's been one of the most impactful for me as well, is recognizing how I was breathing, that I was using, my chest and my shoulders, and I wasn't breathing like a toddler. So again, treat yourself like a toddler, but breathing through your belly, using your diaphragm and your lungs for how they were made. Our bodies are super smart, and we have the ability to manage all of these different mental health issues, which we see in turn impacts our physical health greatly. So just hoping that everyone is an advocate for themselves and takes advantage of these different management and coping mechanisms, because you are in control of your own health. So your homework for this week is, what we talk about. We have to replenish those nutrients in our body because we're using energy all the time. So next time you go grocery shopping, I encourage you to go to the produce section and eat the rainbow. So maybe, if you're going with kids, you can decide, today's color is purple. Let's find a purple fruit or vegetable. And just attempting to get those different colors into your diet. I kind of say like different colors kind of have different micronutrients. So getting that variety in there is really helpful. So yeah, eat the rainbow, get those nutrients in, pay attention to what you're putting into your body, and not in a bad way. I always say I eat 80% nutrition, 20% pleasure. Like, it's supposed to be enjoyable as well. But knowing what you're replenishing and knowing where you're getting that energy and just how important it is to have that energy in your body to even deal with your mental stressors. So please feed yourself and get good sleep. And that is all I have for today.
Jacqueline, there's a comment that says, can you talk a little bit more about the face in the water and how that works?
Oh, the mammalian diving reflex?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
last time you showed did you show a video on that last time?
Yes, let me bring it up. That's my favorite. YouTube. Okay, let's get to it.
And if you have any other questions at this time, feel free to place your questions in the Q&A. You can place your questions with your name or anonymously as well.
Bear with me, I'm just looking for my... Okay.
As you were talking about nutrition, Jacqueline, all I could think of was that old saying, you are what you eat. And it's just very interesting to see how our body is impacted by what we put in our body.
Oh, absolutely. It really blows my mind. Okay, let's see. I want to open this on YouTube. Watching YouTube. Okay, there we go. Gosh, everything's so slow all the time. And let me share my screen. Yeah, this is awesome. I'm so excited to show this again.
Before he attempts the dive, Christopher tests Stig's blood oxygen levels and his pulse.
Just put it on. Just need a second, please.
Yes, you can tell me. You can also hear probably the heartbeat.
Right.
There we go. You got a signal?
I've got a signal. Yeah. So
Yeah, but in those
Oxygen level?
the oxygen level is 98.
Perfect.
That's perfect. The pulse is 81.
Stig's pulse is higher than he'd like for a long dive, but he has a trick up his sleeve.
Okay, so you just take a deep breath, and when you're ready, we're ready. And listen. Now you hear his heartbeat. It's 88 and 86 now, 83, 76.
Within seconds, Stig's pulse starts to fall dramatically.
52, 50, 48.
Stig's tapping into a survival instinct we all possess. It's called the mammalian dive response.
And by placing his face into the water, what that's doing is that's telling the brain to relax. It's that lovely example of when you take a baby and push them underwater. What they do instantly, they relax as they're underwater. And that's the mammalian dive response. So that's helping lower this heart rate.
Feels great.
All right.
Probably in the low 40s or something. But once I go down and the compression and everything's there, it'll drop to 30 or below 25 or something. That's that nice peaceful boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. It's, you know, essentially to keep us alive when we do have to dive deeply. YouTube. So there's another video when there's a person that just puts their face in a bowl of ice water. And again, like we say, lowering your blood pressure, lowering your heart rate, slowing your breathing, those are kind of the keys to trying to manage those stressors. So you're in control of your body. You can manipulate it and force it into calmness.
There's a question in the Q&A. How often should you use the ice water method?
Oh goodness. It's kind of just a cool science experiment, but also I think you can do it whenever you want. It's summer's coming up, might as well, you know?
All right, and if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to place them in the Q&A.
Yeah, I think our takeaway message is just to let everyone know, feed yourself. It's important to stay energized, stay hydrated, move your body. It's meant to move. We're so strong and we're so capable. Just getting out there and using your muscles and getting good sleep. Sleep is when all the restoration happens, and it's when your body does most of its work. So again, I try and treat myself like a little kid, treat yourself the same way that you treat your small child. Take that much care.
Right, thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you to everyone who attended this evening. It was very informative. I really enjoyed it. And there's also a comment for a participant. Thank you so much. This was very informative and helpful.
No, thank you. I'm glad everyone enjoyed.